Folks, hello and welcome to Tavern Chat. I'm your host, your bartender in the OSR, Eric Tenkar, and yesterday's video on, I guess, the nebulous definition of what the OSR is, and looking at an article that tried to define it, has gotten a lot of responses, excellent responses. The comments are gold, and I thought they deserved a video covering them. I'm probably going to do a follow-up video on Targa, what the traditional adventure role playing game association. This is something from back in the beginning of the OSR, and it was an attempt to put the genie in the bottle, I guess you could say, and define stuff. And I don't know if they control stuff, but it had good intentions, but good intentions aren't enough. So let's look at some of the comments. Uh, Mark from Creative Mountain Games, thanks for the video. The article uses old school Renaissance, which is one of the more inclusive versions of the acronym if folks are playing early versions of D&D or other early RPG rules. For me, I play 1E AD&D, so that works for my purposes. Old school rules is another that works for 1E AD&D users, and many using early RPG rules. I've even seemed to recall folks on G+, infamous G+, where I mostly lurked, the term was expanding to cover whatever anyone wanted using the version old school role playing. I know it when I see it is a phrase that needs to be retired. Okay, I'm not going to disagree with that. It's a phrase that a speaker uses to claim that they are the arbiter of what is correct and to avoid the facts being challenged by being vague while holding themselves in authority. I don't know. I think that like when it comes to pornography, one person's pornography is another person's art. I have had discussions with good friends of mine as to what is acceptable in an RPG product, art wise. And what they declared to be PG-13, in my mind, wasn't even PG. And they were saying what we were looking at was beyond PG-13. And I was like, maybe PG? It's really kind of like G plus. Horrible acronym, I guess. Horrible use of the G plus. But, that line is different for different people when it comes to sexuality in art. That line can also be there for something that, in my mind, like the OSR, there's no leader. Right, I'm going to throw this out early and I'll go back to the comments. Years ago, um, there were people that were trying to assign leadership to the OSR. And I've always felt that the OSR is, I don't know, like a traditional army, but like the Horde, right? Like barbarian tribes coming together for one common goal. But they've all got their own flag, they've all got their own leader, and there might be some overlapping, but not everybody gets along. Not everybody wants the same things. Not everybody believes the same things as what defines the OSR. I'm okay with that. But again, the comments have been gold. Let me go back to Mark. Some folks seem to think that OSR means I wrote this new game, and because I liked old games, and in my mind, the new game feels like how I felt playing old games, this new game is an OSR game. There's a ton of that going around. Mind you, I am not gatekeeping. Folks can say what they want, but I'm still happy over here in Lake Geneva just running 1E AD&D when I have the time. Hopefully I'll catch some folks at EggCon in late July to celebrate Gary's birthday. Gold Cat. I like Kevin Crawford's definition of you can run, keep on the Borderlands with only on-the-fly adjustments. I think you can run any game with old school mentality or principles. And NSS, I think that is pretty much the definition. In practice, can you pick up and run one of the TSR adventures easily with just a minor bit of on-the-fly hand-waving during the session? It is OSR. Can someone using the TSR D&D rulebooks run your new adventure with just a minor bit of on-the-fly hand-waving during the session? It's OSR. You obviously cannot do either of those things with WotC D&D. Yeah. I think it's hard to run 5e and then on the fly convert something else to it. Especially since WotC D&D has always had a culture of deck building and strict adherence to official rules and mechanics to support deck building. In all editions of WotC D&D, while TSR D&D was in theory and in practice operating within a context of assumed hand waving. Well, ruling's not rules. I think the problems arise when professional game designers get involved. They turn out a gray sludge of balanced content with no heart or psychological hacks to maximize short-term dopamine hits. They then have a highly vested interest in coming up with arbitrary definitions and correct ways to create a walled garden to drive sales and have a motivation to engage in controlling the narrative of the space to win the contest to create a walled garden. Basically, professionals have no useful place in hobby industries. Yes and no. That's a whole other video. Bro, check out my rules. You can totally run Keep on the Borderland or Isle of Dread with it in a cool way. Is the only thing that is good for the hobby. I don't know. I think a rising tide lifts all ships. I think even the 5e was good for the OSR. But I digress. Stephen Fowler. I actually got banned from an OSR group because the owner is adamant that 2e is an old school. By the way, old school Renaissance. And Joe Kurkowski, anyone trying to exclude 2e isn't worth talking to anyway. I've heard the arguments that 2e isn't OSR. Spells and Powers, the last option books, they were certainly here's what's coming in 3e, but earlier 2e was a bloated system with splat books, but I think it was still OSR. But that's a whole other video too. Nightbird. Gygax himself said that the greatest secret was that you didn't need the books to play D&D. Is Mork Borg OSR? Is Shadow Dark? Is anything? If it feels like it, if it looks like it, and it plays like it, sure, why not? Even more party members. Mr. Gunn. I always viewed old school revival Renaissance as a style of play, not a specific game or game system. Well, that's certainly how it's being marketed on places like DriveThru, right? OSR is a marketing term. Again, there's a whole video I can do on that one. Tell me what you want me to do for follow-up videos, folks. I'd really be interested to see where the interest is. Black Jar. When I started getting back into D&D and talking to my sister and teaching my niece and nephew to play Beckme rules, I called it old school D&D. Then I learned about the OSR, liked some of the ideas, didn't like others. That's purely OSR in its nature. After reading the 6 cultures of play from the retired adventurers that included my style was classic and not quite the same as the modern OSR. I borrow some ideas from an OSR video and post, but maintain a classic. Then when I decided to type up and publish the Mega Dungeon mini campaign I made for them, Skirfear's Mine, I did put OSR on the cover, along with the mistyped type. Well, again, OSR is certainly, it's marketing, right? And this is an industry, whether people like it or not. Chris Lundgren, I have heard it to mean now as original school RPGs. It has expanded beyond its original meaning. Reverence Pavane. For me, OSR started with the creation of the first clones of the early D&D rule sets that were no longer available, except on a second-hand market at collector's prices. The actual term OSR for the group of creators that produced content using those rules came later. It gave an identity for those creators to coalesce around. So yes, the focus was on D&D rather than any other game, since those other games were mostly still available in print. But the only contender for this status in other systems is Chivalry and Sorcery due to a second edition no longer being sold, and the third editions being a totally different game system, leaving the Red Book clone as the only readily available reference for those earlier games. It's not a style of play, although many people wish it would be. How could it really be when there are so many ways to play the game? There were so many ways to play the game back then. I know I can. I was in a group in the Poconos and a group in New York City in my formative older teen years, and we played very differently in both groups. That's for sure. And the recapturing of that diversity of play was important, especially in reaction to the increasingly well-defined words and play of the more modern versions of the game. And there is no doubt that an adverse reaction to the suggested style of play in the official rules did help fuel the expansion of the OSR. People were experimenting with creativity and new approaches, which is great, as it being very lazy, it gives me more ideas to steal from. Borrow. But this intentional antagonism to modern rules has usurped the OSR movement, which often defines itself now in vehement opposition to certain styles of play, which is an inherently negative way of defining yourself, and just serves the fractional role-playing community. The only wrong way to play these games is not to have fun doing so. Edlib, yeah. I think the problem comes when you try to truly define something and codify it. That can be an issue. You take a bit of the soul away and lose what was magical about it in the first place. You start to make it an academic thought process or thought exercise and lose what was a natural, spontaneous phenomenon. Messy, chaotic, and fun. People breaking new ground and starting a movement don't take the time to put what they are doing into a neat and easy to describe package. Pretty insightful. In my opinion, this is one of the comments that it strikes to my heart. They are just busy getting on with it. It's the people who come later who want to intellectualize what they are seeing, who are the ones who attempt to scout and set the boundaries of a movement and tell others what is and isn't a proper way to participate. It's like asking, what is rock music? How do you play it? Who is playing it? Who gets to play it and or call themselves a rock band? I often have questions as to who gets, what the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame or whatever the hell it is. I do question some of the bands. Are like, they're rock? But who am I to judge? I'm not the one making those calls. As soon as you do that, it kind of loses some of the uniqueness and punch it originally had. Now it's a commodity and a product you can wrap up in a neat little box and a set of rules you can use to teach others. And as soon as you start to divide it into a billion subcategories and genres and start to set up partisan camps within the community, it's pretty much over. It will only ever be relevant to the old-timer hanger-ons. Bo Paints Minis. I am an old-school gamer, both in substance and in style. My current game is GURPS 4E. My next will likely be Champions 4E. Am I moving backwards through time? Although they are most definitely old-school role-playing games, also almost no one would consider them OSR. Why? Because the movement OSR only means fantasy RPGs that use the SRD OGL D20 rules, but are not made by Wizards or Paizo. It's a big club, but Traveler, Call of Cthulhu, Cyberpunk 2020, RuneQuest, Tunnels and Trolls, GURPS, and all the rest are in it. It's a D&D club, and I am not a big D&D fan. Wisdom. In 10 to 15 years, D&D 5e will probably refer to as OSR, and I am sure gaming convention standards and styles will change. In the end, as long as you're playing the game you like, does it really matter? Commander Elton Poole. Look, OSR is what OSR is. It doesn't matter if the name is dumb. We all know what it means. But that's the whole thing. We don't even know what the OSR stands for. Oh, it stands for multiple things. It's D&D, specifically D&D before 3rd edition, and new games would try and create that Recreate that feel and flavor. It doesn't matter if someone wants to make a RuneQuest clone. Go for it. It ain't OSR though. Incidentally, I count 2E as OSR because of a couple of optional rules is identical to 1E. You don't have to use the spot books. Very good point. I think the differentiation between OSR and new SR is quite useful. I don't think you could ever claim Karn as OSR, for example. Bill Skinner, sorry, Bill. That last discussion point, gatekeeping is a moral imperative. If you don't gatekeep the OSR, then soon enough, 4 and 5e will become OSR, and then OSR means nothing. It's how your hobby or product for your specific audience becomes diluted into gray sludge that is now nebulous. Everyone. I am not advocating that we keep out everyone, but that we just let those in who like what the OSR already is, not those that want to make the OSR something that it's not. That almost sounds like people talking about people migrating from one state to another state and trying to change the state they're moving to be the state that they're fleeing, even though they fled the state that they're fleeing for a reason. M. Melman. The Ford analogy is absurd. Ford is a brand name. Calling a forum Old Ford to give people notice. It's for Fords and not Nissans. No appeals to original context are required. More accurate article would have gone, we had a myopic understanding of gaming at the time. It did not occur to us. Other games can be considered old school. We apologize for not thinking things through. Science Mile. It could possibly be a trademark issue to be unable to directly refer to a brand, but I don't know. Probably more likely if you're trying to sell something. I think that the discussion going on reminds me of what blogs were back when I started blogging. How many years ago that is now? 15? Just about. OSR just a little bit older. Again, folks, these are your compatriots. These are your fellow gamers, your fellow OSR fans, community members. These are their thoughts. I think all the thoughts are valid. All the thoughts are good. Tell me what you again. I'm thinking of doing a follow up addressing Targa. But are there any the commercialization of the OSR? Let me know in the comments what you want to see as a follow up. All right, folks. I hope I've said this before. I'm pretty sure I have. This is your channel. And while I am certainly the face of it, the content should reflect what you yourself, as a whole, are looking for. And I'm happy to go down rabbit holes. All right. So, as usual, be safe, be well. God bless. Roll those dice. Roll them well. Back again tomorrow with another video. Catch you all later.